Iran has entered one of its most difficult moments since the beginning of the new crisis in the Middle East, and Donald Trump decided to exploit this weakness in public. The statement dominating the news this Friday, April 24, 2026, is straightforward. For the President of the United States, Tehran is in chaos, without clear leadership, without a unified message, and without the political strength to quickly decide its own future. The central issue now is no longer just the sea, the ships, or the strait. The central issue is the power within Iran. Who is in charge? Who negotiates? Who backs down? Who keeps the Islamic Revolutionary Guard in check? And who has real authority to accept an agreement? I'll tell you all about that in a moment, but right now, you'll want to subscribe to the channel to stay well informed with real-time information and the best journalistic quality you've ever seen. With the standard of credibility, Milson Alves. Trump said that Iran is having a lot of trouble figuring out who its leader is. The statement was used as a political bomb against Tehran. It's not just a provocation, it's a clear attempt to show the world that the Iranian regime has lost the stability it always tried to project both internally and externally. According to the position defended by Washington, there is a struggle between the hardline sectors of the regime and groups that are trying to gain respect amid the collapse caused by war, the economy, and international pressure. The image that Trump paints is simple and powerful. Iran is not just under pressure, it's disorganized. The regime, which for years tried to present itself as a closed, obedient structure, ready to face any enemy, now seems divided, slow, and confused. Trump's statement targets exactly that point. A regime that can't show who makes the decisions sends a message of weakness. A regime that can't send a unified proposal gives the impression that it has lost control of its own negotiating table. And that's when the crisis reaches a new level. Before, Tehran tried to sell the idea of resistance. Now it needs to prove that it still has control. Before, it threatened its adversaries. Now it needs to answer why its leadership seems so fractured. Before, it tried to scare the world with gambles. Now there's the possibility of escalating the crisis. Now, it sees Trump saying that he's not in a hurry because the United States believes it holds all the cards. Economic pressure is an essential part of this scenario. Trump stated that Iran is starving for money and collapsing financially, saying that the regime would lose $500 million a day with the pressure on its oil routes. Fox News reported that the president also made accusations. He accused Iranian military and police officers of complaining about not being paid. In an attempt to show that the problem had already moved beyond foreign policy and entered the internal workings of the regime. This is the most painful point for Tehran. The crisis is not just diplomatic, it's financial. The regime needs money to maintain the Islamic Revolutionary Guard, to support its allies, to control the streets, and to keep the state machinery running. When that money starts to run out, the propaganda loses strength. The rhetoric of resistance becomes more expensive. The promise of victory turns into a burden. And the question that is growing within Iran itself is simple. How long will the people keep paying this price? The Revolutionary Guard appears at the center of this tension. Euronews reported that the group has gained even more influence in the decisions of the Iranian state, with signs that civilian leaders have been sidelined and that figures linked to the Guard have started to control military and political decisions. The report points out that the Revolutionary Command has become a dominant military, economic, and political force in the country. This helps explain Trump's statement about chaos. When the civilian leadership loses ground and the military wing takes more power, the regime tries to appear strong, but it also reveals fear. Instead of showing confidence in Trump, the Constitution shows dependence on armed men. Instead of showing a clear negotiation, it shows a struggle for survival. Instead of opening a political way out, it dumps the crisis in the lap of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard, which has an interest in maintaining a tough stance so as not to appear defeated. The problem is that a tough stance is expensive. It costs money, it costs isolation, and it costs stability. If Iran gives in quickly, the more radical sectors accuse the government of failing. If Iran resists too much, the economy sinks even further. If it tries to negotiate, it needs to decide who speaks on behalf of the regime. If it doesn't negotiate, it remains stuck in a cycle of attrition. This is the labyrinth that Trump is exploring. In the international news, there's also Tehran's attempt to respond to the accusation of division. Iranian leaders released almost identical messages in a tone of unity to show support for the supreme leader and reject the narrative of internal division. The Wall Street Journal reported that these coordinated statements came right after Trump's remarks about division in the Iranian leadership. But this reaction also has the opposite effect. When several leaders have to repeat almost the same phrase to show unity, doubt has already been planted. True unity doesn't need to be staged with such urgency. When the regime has to rush to say it's united, it's because the accusation hurt, and Trump knows that. He doesn't need to prove every crack. It's enough to ask the right question at the right time: who really rules in Tehran? Iran International reported that economic pressures and internal divisions could end up pushing the Iranian leadership back to the negotiating table. For ordinary Iranians, the idea of victory may depend less on geopolitics and more on the ability to survive the economic collapse unfolding around them. It's about survival. To the economic collapse unfolding around them. Control of information has become part of this battle. Iran International also reported that Iran has moved forward with a selective internet access model in which some sectors would have unrestricted access while most of the population would remain limited. Experts interviewed by the publication see this as an attempt to turn a wartime measure into a more permanent system of digital control. This point shows the regime's fear. When the government restricts information during a crisis, it is not just defending itself from external enemies. It is trying to control its own population. It is trying to prevent revolt, criticism, and comparisons with the outside world from growing too quickly. This reinforces the perception of internal chaos. A secure regime doesn't need to close the window. A nervous regime tries to control even the light that comes in. Trump, in turn, uses this situation to increase psychological pressure. By saying that Iran doesn't know who its leader is, he's speaking to Washington, to the allies, to the market, and also to the Iranian people. The message is, your leaders are not in control. They fight among themselves, lose money, try to buy time, and can't decide on a way out. It's a simple statement but with a heavy impact. For Tehran, this is devastating. The regime has always tried to present the conflict as a struggle between equals, resistance against the empire, sovereignty against pressure, courage against threat. But the interpretation that Trump tries to impose is different. A superpower pressuring a disoriented regime. The American government is waiting for a proposal from the Iranian command, which still hasn't managed to speak clearly. A White House saying that time is against the Ayatollahs. And that's precisely why Tehran's statement had an impact. He didn't just say that Iran is in crisis. He said that Iran doesn't know who its leader is. That's a brutal accusation for a regime built around religious authority, military discipline, and political control. The statement strikes at the symbol of the system. It attacks the head, not the periphery. In the end, Iran is going through very difficult times because the crisis is no longer just external. The president didn't realize this and turned Iran's weakness into strength for the United States. Trump bets that the regime is weaker than it admits. And this week's crisis shows exactly that picture. Iran pressured from the outside, cracking from within, and trying to convince the world that it's in control. Meanwhile, Washington repeats the phrase that hurts the Ayatollahs the most: Iran is in chaos. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and at the end, check out the comments so you can be even more engaged with the Milson Alves community.